Good morning. Today's episode is called Lunch with Max Hazan. Please pass the salt shaker. Now, Max is quite possibly the most celebrated custom builder in the world today. So many of you probably think you've seen or read or heard everything there is to know about Max. But I can assure you that you're not familiar with the goings-on of the lunch that is at the heart of today's episode, because there were only two people at that lunch, Max and me, and this story has not yet been told. Let's start with the evolution of our relationship, which has been the subject of a fair bit of publicity, even though Max and I both prefer to keep a low profile. 2 years ago, Pipeburn published an extensive article titled "The Man with Five Hazans," which trumpeted the rarity of one man owning 5 of Max's custom creations, a feat which Pipeburn likened to, quote, walking on Mars or curing cancer using only a 6-pack of beer and some toenail clippings. Well, I can assure you that I've never walked on Mars or discovered a cure for toenail fungus, let alone cancer, but we have upped our lineup of Hazans to 6. Well, speaking of toenails, here's a thumbnail sketch of each of the first 5 Hazans that we acquired for the museum. The twin musket, which we commissioned in 2015, our first commission of Max, is often credited by Max himself as having salvaged his career as a custom builder. It went on to be awarded Custom Bike of the Year by Pipeburn. Next, the supercharged Ironhead, also honored as Custom Bike of the Year by Pipeburn, is one that I actually discovered in Max's shop, literally hidden under a cover. And I convinced him to complete the bike and join it with the twin musket in my collection. The stunning Black Knight, commissioned in 2016, with its external rear sprocket and split rear fender, sports a pure black patina, which was a stylistic departure for Max. Next, the supercharged KTM, commissioned in 2017, captured the crown in the Artistry and Iron competition in Las Vegas, which was the only contest it ever entered. And finally, First Bike, which was actually his first bike, built by Max in 2011 during his convalescence from a crippling off-road crash, shows the sparks of genius that would eventually personify the Hazan style. But it's this one, the 6th of our Hazans in the museum and the 4th from-scratch build that we commissioned, that lies at the heart of the tale of this episode. Now I'm sure it's no secret that this white missile, which we named the Salt Shaker, topped 207 miles per hour at Bonneville in September 2019 to set a new world record in its class. Max deserves all the credit for that achievement. He built this racer from scratch. He recovered from a setback when Momentous, who built the original engine, went belly up and Max had to reprogram the engine himself. And of course, Max was the one whose hand was on the throttle at Bonneville. All I did was to facilitate the realization of his dream by agreeing to finance this speed demon. But that was not a decision I reached lightly. I reached it only after an intense and candid discussion at lunch one day with Max. By now it's probably obvious that Max and I have a great partnership. But it's something deeper than patron and builder. It's more akin to father and son. And when Max approached me to back him and to help him build the racer by providing the financial sponsorship, both of those roles came into play. As his patron, as his lead patron, I wanted to facilitate the realization of a dream that Max felt very intensely. But as a surrogate father, I was very concerned. I had deep reservations about facilitating his ability to get onto the salt at Bonneville and attempting to go 200 miles per hour. And the culmination of this tension between my two roles came into play when I invited Max to lunch one day. At that lunch, I probed and I prodded very hard with Max. This was not a custom build where the worst thing that happens is it doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out. This was racing. In racing, you can crash, you can lose your life. And I asked Max whether he felt he was fully aware of those risks. Not just an awareness that, yeah, that can happen, but what would happen to the people in his life? And I said, does Ira, his father, whom I know well and respect, does Ira approve of this? Does Sarah, his wife, approve of this? And Max, being a pretty tough guy, said, oh yeah, no problem. And he kind of wanted to move on to the next topic. And I said, hey Max, you just married Sarah. What if when you go to Bonneville, she's pregnant? Have you thought about that? And I think that stunned him a little bit. And it turns out that when Max did his world record run at Bonneville, Sarah was pregnant. In fact, she just gave birth to a magnificent baby boy, Jack. Max then pushed back a little bit. And he said, Bobby, you've done some things that are very, very dangerous. And he cited the fact that I dangled out of a helicopter for 10 years with National Geographic, and that I joined a gang for purposes of writing a book about gang life and would travel at 95 miles an hour a few feet from the motorcycle in front of me with another one right behind me as we went in tight formation. And I said, Max, that's true, but I did that at a different stage of my life. My kids were grown. I was secure with how I was going to take care of myself and take care of them. That's not true of where you are in your life right now. And Max didn't mention the most dangerous thing I ever did in my life, and that was attempting to raise 3 teenage daughters, from which I was able to recover with only occasional scar tissue and wounds, which survive to this day. But we reached a compromise. And I said, I'll tell you what, I will back you on that project. I will back you in building this salt shaker on one condition. And that is, if you ever feel uncomfortable about your ability to handle this at Bonneville, you will come to me and we will get a professional racer to ride at Bonneville. You build it, that racer will race it. Is that a deal? And Max said, yeah, that's a deal. And that was the deal that we had before we went to Bonneville. And once we were at Bonneville, Stacy and I could barely watch Max race. We watched from about as far a distance as we could and still see that little white missile flying across the salt flats. And more than a few times I thought back to that lunch in Los Angeles when Max asked me to please pass the salt shaker, and I did.